When people think of anime studios from the past, and they look at the studios that really left a mark in the anime industry, people often think of Studio Ghibli, Gainax, Trigger, Kyoto Animation, WIT, just to name a few. Common traits that often are associated with these studios include quality animation, unique storytelling, and visionary style that separates them from the hundreds of titles that come out each year. But one studio is often overlooked that embodies many of these traits, yet never was able to sustain themselves. This would be Studio Manglobe. Now almost a decade since the studio's demise, I thought it would be interesting to look back and see this promising studio that just never seemed to have the inertia to spread its wings and fly. Arguably, if you were an anime fan in the mid-2000s, more than likely you watched something from their studio, whether you were a casual Toonami watcher or deep into the streaming scene. Manglobe made an impact on the fandom at large. Even in hindsight, a good portion of their catalog is favorably looked upon, although fan approval did not translate to commercial success. In this video, I will explore if Manglobe was truly a one-hit wonder or just unlucky. Act 1. The Early Years. Interestingly, there's not really a lot of information on Manglobe. Founded in 2002 by two former Sunrise employees, Shinichiro Kobayashi, who was a well-accomplished man in the industry, working on such titles as Angel's Eggs, Urusei Yatsura, Beautiful Dreamer, Lupin the Third, A Castle of Cagliostro, Revolutionary Girl Utena, to name a few, as well as Takahashi Koichiyama, who worked on many Sunrise shows such as Brigadoon, Gao Gaigar, The King of Braves, and Say Cry Ed. They had a clear desire to make high-quality original anime, and their mission would unfortunately become muddled as time went on. Manglobe created 4 original anime during its run: Samurai Champloo, Ergo Proxy, Michigo and Hatchin, and Samurai Flamenco. Original titles were notoriously known for being a double-edged sword. On the one side, by being on the production community, it allowed for a lot more freedom in storytelling and also potentially yielding better profits versus just being a manufacturer of art. Although on the swing side of this, original properties do have a higher chance of failure due to having no manga, light novel, or other existing source material to lean on. I believe that the philosophy of the studio was to make themselves much in the similar vein as Gainax or Trigger, where they have many successful original works in their catalog. Another interesting thing I like to point out is that Manglobe also had another interesting leg up compared to a lot of their competition, in the sense that a lot of their titles also had a lot of great exposure. 3 of their titles ended up being on Toonami, which includes Samurai Champloo, Dead Man Wonderland, and Michigo and Hatchin. Jason DeMarco, who is the head of Toonami, really pushed for a lot of these series to be on the network, as well as Ergo Proxy actually played on a network called G4 Tech TV, which was a popular video game channel in the 2000s. Most of their works would end up being licensed through Funimation, as well as many other licensors in the 2000s as well, such as Geneon, Bandai Entertainment, Sentai Filmworks, Aniplex of America, as well as Netflix. And even till today, a lot of these titles are still readily available on sites such as Crunchyroll and Hulu as of the recording of this video. Manglobe's first and arguably most successful work came out in 2004, which was Samurai Champloo, directed by the legendary Shinichiro Watanabe of Cowboy Bebop fame. Samurai Champloo was instantly a cult classic, playing on reruns years after its original syndication, and was really noted for having a monumentally great soundtrack, voice actors, and storytelling, which was really unique and stylized compared to a lot of other anime at the time. Western fans became very obsessed with this particular title and was a popular cosplay in the 2000s and 2010s. Another thing to also point out is that Samurai Champloo was actually incorporated into the American animated series The Boondocks, which has several references to it over its run. Although this work had lukewarm success in Japan, the Western market really made up for the deficiency and then some. And it's hard to say whether or not it was purely because of Watanabe and Cowboy Bebop, or whether this unique property stood on its own legs, but unfortunately, like I mentioned, a lot of the success would not be repeatable on the same scale again. The next title that Manglobe would release in 2006 would be an original work called Ergo Proxy, a dystopian sci-fi series similar in vein to Ghost in the Shell and Psycho Pass. Unfortunately, the studio decided to release the series on a pay-per-view channel instead of traditional public broadcast. which severely limited the audience in Japan. Although the series did have a minor success in the English market, it was considered to be a complete flop in Japan. But this would not dissuade Manglobe from its desire to continue to create original anime. Manglobe's third original work would be released in 2008 and 2009, titled Michigo and Hatchin. This would be the directorial debut of Saya Yamamoto, now famous for being the director of Lupin III, A Woman Named Fujiko Mine, as well as the monumentally popular Yuri on Ice. It was a title that had a lot of great story and sound design, very similar to Samurai Champloo, and unfortunately this title came out at the worst possible time, coming out during the 2008-2009 economic crash. The series unfortunately fell into licensing hell, only to be picked up years later by Funimation in 2013, and actually was aired on Toonami. The lead English voice actress, Monica Rial, would go on record saying that this was one of her favorite voice acting roles. Although the show performed okay in the West, unfortunately the series at this point was written off as a financial failure. Dreams of making original works were starting to become unfeasible, and after this, Manglobe would have to pivot its strategy to stay afloat. Act 2: The Trend-Chasing Years. By the early 2010s, Manglobe was not in the best financial situation. After 2 commercial failures that limited their ability to create original works, and with the need to inject cash into the company, Manglobe would choose to pursue more profitable, stable ventures. More otaku-based shows became the staple for a number of years. The Sacred Blacksmith would be a very fan service-filled series with little fanfare flair for the original Manglobe. This also would be in the early years of the light novel boom, which often played to the studio's benefit. Although the series did perform well commercially in Japan, and to a lesser extent in the West, it definitely helped Manglobe's financial issues at the time being. Another adaptation that Manglobe would work on would be the series The World God Only Knows, which ran for 3 seasons, and arguably was well received by fans and critics. Apparently the studio was friends with the creator Tamaki Wakakaki, and apparently were pretty good friends with the studio. The work was relatively fun adaptation, which you could really tell the studio was able to balance between their own personal style and being a commercial success as well. Another manga adaptation that was relatively successful in both the Japanese and English-speaking world was Dead Man Wonderland, a dark action show that definitely had flares of some of their previous work, such as Ergo Proxy, in their art style. An interesting side note is that the English manga was actually released by Tokyopop, who released the first 5 volumes before going bankrupt. The series was then later relicensed by Viz, who ended up completing the run, which I find to be kind of an interesting side note. Though these adaptations were well received and definitely financially helped Manglobe, there also were a handful that financially did not really pay off. Such titles such as House of 5 Leaves, Carnival, Mashiro Symphony were arguably not as popular or successful, as well as 2 seasons of Hayate the Combat Butler, which relatively speaking had very low quality animation compared to a lot of Manglobe's past works. But Manglobe still had one trick up their sleeve in their hopes to go back to the roots of creating an original anime. Act 3: The Downfall. Manglobe once again tried their hand at an original anime with Samurai Flamenco in 2013. The work would play off the Super Sentai genre with an average guy trying to become a superhero. Sad to say, the show was a major financial failure in both Japan, as well as only being streamed on Netflix in the West for a very short period of time. To add insult to injury, the series was a 2-core, 22 episodes that really was a major financial blow to the company, and at this point, they were on life support. In 2015, Manglobe would adapt the manga Gangsta, a highly stylized manga which was a very popular series at the time. At the same time as Gangsta, they also were working on a movie adaptation of Genocidal Organ. But after years of poor management and bad luck, the studio was really running on fumes, and unfortunately declared bankruptcy 2 days after the Gangsta anime had finished. In watching the series in preparation for this video, it was very clear that the last 3 episodes were running on fumes, as well as the series ended on a cliffhanger that really needed one more episode to wrap up the storyline. It was later reported that the studio was 320 million yen, or approximately $2.3 million, in debt, thus ending Manglobe. Final thoughts on Manglobe is, although they were never able to rise to the ambitious heights that they originally wanted to, I personally don't believe that they were a one-hit wonder. On a critical level, many of their works are still well received by fans, and according to My Anime List, most are rated at least 7.0 or above, which is generally considered to be an above average series. This did not translate to commercial success. Even years later, fans still seek out many of these titles beyond just Samurai Champloo. It's hard to say whether or not Manglobe would have survived under different circumstances. Personally, I think if the company would have made shorter original works, 12 to 13 episodes in length, and maybe alternated them between adapting other material, it may have helped their bottom line. I don't think a lot of studios could have predicted what would have happened with the 2008 recession, as well as the decline of physical media in the 2010s. Fortunately, Manglobe still exists through its successor company, Geno Studios, which has had some relatively decent success with adapting 3 seasons of Golden Kamuy, as well as an entry into Star Wars Visions. So let me know if you have any memories of Manglobe or any details I may have overlooked. Like and subscribe, and look out for my next video.